I'm about to flow.
Cause he's rhyming with the O.
Once had an afro, but now some cornrow. Thinky, yes, I'm thinky. Bending like a slinky.
In the early 90s, I operated under different names, but I changed it to Pidgin Music in 1997. Admittedly, because I wanted my scope to be bigger than hip life. Pidgin Music for me was the most encompassing phrase that I could think of. There are so many elements within hip-hop that you can find the root of in existing African culture today. Whether it's the gold, whether it is the dances, whether it's the crew. All of these are phenomena which existed in the African context. You've got to remember, I grew up in Ghana. I'd seen Jedouble Ambole rapping in 1974, 1975. So when Rappers Delight or T-Ski Valley or Curtis Blow came along, it wasn't anything new to me. I felt it was something that I knew already. My idea was to remove the middleman and connect the present with the past. At least the last 100 years, America has sold African culture to the world as popular American culture, whether it's jazz, soul, funk, dance, disco. They were all African subcultures within America. Instantly in hip-hop, you've got an MC. And the master of ceremony is obviously the Ochiami. Before hip-hop came along, the drums in music were quiet. But most of the music that we heard, the drums simply weren't loud enough. But in hip-hop, you don't say, oh, a hip-hop instrumental. It's called a beat. So what it tells you is that the rhythm, the beat, is the most important part of this music. So for me, hip-hop was bringing music closer and closer and closer to my village, my culture. And therefore, it made sense to go back to my village, take exactly the same thing, which is still alive, still intact, has not been affected by 500 years of slavery, and bring it back into the modern context. Hip life would never have happened without the diaspora, because we had to go and live in the diaspora to understand what was truly unique about us. Until 1989, 1990, there were many British hip-hop artists imitating the Americans, and it just didn't work. It didn't resonate with anybody. As soon as a few people, London Posse, Demon Boys, Rebel MC, started creating hip-hop derived music with a very strong British identity, suddenly it worked. I was focused on trying to produce African hip-hop in Britain. And I worked with African artists from all over, from Sierra Leone, from Liberia, from Ghana. So in the early 90s, before I came back to Ghana, the problem was that in 1990, Africa was not trendy in England. You know, African boy was an insult. And so Africans didn't have a sense of pride. So all the artists I tried to work with didn't have the confidence to say, okay, I'm going to make hip hop as an African. So in 1993, I left London, I came back to Ghana, and in Ghana, I found very young artists, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. It was much easier to work with them to develop an African sound because they were not bamboozled by the shame that being African in Europe carried. So I realized this hip life or this African hip-hop revolution can only take place here. In that time period, I produced demos for every artist I could find who was doing something with a Ghanaian or an African slant. I produced songs and videos for Talking Drums, which were based on Batakari rather than baseball shirts, that were based on, sitting around a tree instead of, sitting in the stoop of a building in Brooklyn or in the Bronx. So I just understood that hip-hop doesn't need an American accent. Hip-hop doesn't need an American shirt. Hip-hop doesn't need to talk about things that are unique to America. Actually, if we are going to create our own movement, we need to look at the things that are unique to us and put those things in our music because that is what will make our music unique.
They don't really know one identity, so how you go describe yourself? I be the smell the melanin in my aroma.
The focus was always how do we create music using the ethos or the production techniques of hip-hop, but making it relevant to us, making it relevant to our history, making it relevant to our culture. Because at the end of the day, whether it's reggae, whether it's hip-hop, whether it's jazz, whether it's funk, all of them are derived from our culture anyway. And it was difficult in the beginning to get the artists who could fake an American accent to understand that, hip-hop is not American. Hip-hop is African. Why should I put on an American accent to rap if the culture of hip-hop is African? My African accent is better for hip-hop than an American accent. The influence of Ghana is not limited to Ghana alone. I did a lot of work in Nigeria and also in South Africa over the last, 30 years. Ghana was very much the pioneer of domesticating hip-hop. Ghana is the first country in Africa where we started using local rhythms instead of boom cha that hip-hop brought to us. So we changed the rhythm of hip-hop to make it more suitable for us. We changed the language of hip-hop. We changed the style of hip-hop. So Batakari, for instance, is how, if you look at Talking Drums video from 1994, they are wearing Batakaris. They are not wearing baseball shirts. Ghana hasn't just influenced Africa, we've influenced the entire globe, and in part it's because Ghana has a very strong culture, Ghana has a very strong identity, Ghana has 70 odd languages, all of which can pull hip-hop in a different direction. So we had a God-given advantage in terms of domesticating hip-hop, which has a lot in common with our culture. I'm Akwapim. Where I come from, the Ochiami is the most powerful voice in the society. He is the master of ceremony. So hip-hop identifying the master of ceremony as the center of the universe made total sense to me. Ghana is incredibly significant in the globalization of hip-hop because I think we taught many people how to apply their own identities to the phenomenon that is hip-hop. So it's important that the museum celebrates it because this is a global phenomenon. It's not just a Ghanaian thing. It's much bigger than that.
The one who knows that he who knows not and knows not that he knows not is a victim of the